The lantern bearer of truth, the story and philosophy of Diogenes. In the bustling city of ancient Athens in Greece, filled with marble temples, proud philosophers, and ambitious citizens, there once lived a phenomenal man who had almost nothing, no home, no possessions, not even shoes. Yet, this strange, half naked man was feared, ridiculed, respected, and remembered long after kings and conquerors vanished into dust. His name was Diogenes of Sinope, the philosopher who dared to mock civilization itself. Diogenes was a cynic. He was a rebel philosopher. Born in Sinope, a Greek colony on the coast of the Black Sea around 412 BC, his life began in scandal. His father was accused of tampering with the city's currency, and Diogenes himself was banished. But this exile would turn him into one of the most defiant thinkers in history. He came to Athens, the intellectual capital of the world, at a time when Socrates' ideas were still echoing around through the streets. But while most philosophers debated logic and metaphysics, Diogenes cared about something far simpler and perhaps far more radical: how to live. He gave birth to cynicism. Diogenes founded what came to be known as cynicism from the Greek word kynikos, meaning dog like. The nickname fit him perfectly. He lived like a stray dog in a discarded barrel or a large clay jar near the marketplace, owning nothing except a cloak, a staff, and a small bowl. But even that bowl did not last long. One day, seeing a boy drinking water with his cupped hands, Diogenes threw the bowl away and exclaimed, "A child has beaten me in simplicity." To him, civilization was a trap, full of greed, falsehood, and vanity. People were slaves to wealth, pleasure, and opinion. They build grand houses, he said, but forget to build character. He believed happiness lay in freedom, not political freedom, but freedom from desire. He ate what he found. He slept wherever he liked and spoke whatever he thought, often to the embarrassment of everyone around him. If a rich man passed by, Diogenes might insult him. If someone mocked his poverty, he would mock their dependence. His motto could be summed up in three words: live without lies. His philosophy was very simple. It was a rebellion against hypocrisy. He believed that virtue is the only true wealth. Good life does not require money or possessions, it just requires honesty and courage. He believed that nature is the best teacher. Humans should live as nature intended, simply, freely, and truthfully, not according to artificial social rules. He believed that shame is the product of pretense. If something is natural, it cannot be shameful. He mocked customs that made people hide ordinary human behavior while praising greed and corruption. He thought that freedom is independence from desire. The fewer things you need, the closer you are to being godlike. So, to live a simple life, which is very minimalistic and with less needs, is an ideal life. In modern words, Diogenes was the world's first minimalist, a man who declared war on consumerism 2400 years before the capitalist economy was established. He was a lantern in daylight. One of the most famous stories about him says that Diogenes once walked around the streets of Athens in broad daylight, carrying a lit lantern. When people laughed and asked what he was doing, he replied, "I am looking for an honest man." It was his biting way of saying that in all of Athens, the city of wisdom, democracy, and philosophy, he could not find a single person who lived truthfully and honestly. His lantern became a symbol of philosophical rebellion, the search for truth in a world full of pretenders. His meeting with Alexander is legendary. One morning, while Diogenes was sunbathing outside his barrel, a crowd began to gather. The most powerful man on earth, Alexander the Great, had come to see him. The young conqueror had heard of the strange philosopher who mocked kings and lived like a beggar, and he wanted to meet him in person. Alexander approached respectfully. I am Alexander, he said, the great king. Diogenes barely looked up. And I, Diogenes said, am Diogenes, the dog. Amused rather than offended, Alexander admired the old man's fearless honesty. I like you, Alexander said. Ask me anything you wish, and I will grant it. Diogenes barely looked up. Diogenes said very calmly, yes, I want something from you. Stand out of my sunlight. That was all. The crowd gasped, but Alexander smiled. Here was a man who truly needed nothing from him, not wealth, not power, not fame. Later, Alexander told his generals, if I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes. The death of a free man. Diogenes lived to old age, dying around 323 BC, the same year that Alexander died. Accounts differ. Some say he died of an illness, others say he simply held his breath to end his life. Either way, he died as he lived, free, fearless, and indifferent to what anyone thought. When asked how he wished to be buried, he reportedly said, throw me to the wild dogs. I would gladly feed my brothers. Even in death, he refused to let convention dictate his dignity. Diogenes left behind a legacy. He did not leave behind schools, disciples, or temples, but he left an idea. His spirit influenced later Stoic philosophers like Zeno, who built upon his teachings to create Stoicism. In a sense, cynicism was the seed and Stoicism was the tree. He remains the embodiment of intellectual courage, a man who spat on luxury, who mocked false virtue, and proved that philosophy is not just about thinking but about living. In a world obsessed with image, Diogenes reminds us that truth, simplicity, and independence are the highest forms of wealth. He carried his lantern not just through the streets of Athens, but through the ages, lighting the way for anyone brave enough to live without lies. Thank you so much for listening.